Hello and welcome to Mysteries of Migration, Consequences for Conservation. My name's Tom Wood. I'm a professor at George Mason University, and this was one of the first model courses brought in back in 1999 and 2000 for the SENCER project. And what I'd like to do with you today is run you through this model course so that you can use it to get some ideas for courses that you might be teaching. I'd just like to remind you that over the years, the model courses have proven to be a good resource for a number of faculty. Many people have contacted me about this course, but nobody's ever used it in the content that's in this course exactly the same way in any other university. And these are meant to be course examples that you can take specific pedagogical approaches to a course that has a censored flavor to it, and use those kinds of pedagogical practices to improve the quality of your course for your students. Okay, so the objectives of this particular session are to help you understand how this model course can become a reference for you to use to develop your own course, to help you understand what I mean by a learning community structure for a course, and how that helps you create a sensorized environment, and then to introduce a few pedagogies that you might want to use or modify in your course for your course goals, and then maybe open a line of discussion. I'm happy to correspond with you or recommend other people in the SENCER network that might be interested in a collaborative kind of approach to developing your courses. So everybody get on board. This is one of the species that I work with Jefferson salamanders, interesting for undergraduate research at the moment, and an interesting migratory organism. So the impetus for this course is an interesting story. It came about when I was teaching a more traditional biology 103 course where there were lots of students, a large lecture style course. And I actually asked the class what large natural history phenomena occurred around them every year. This is Northern Virginia. These are 18, 19-year-old students who are coming to the university that had grown up in the area. And when I asked that question, I said, what is the big natural history phenomena that occurs around you every year at this time that you don't see at other times? This was something that was a little scary to the students, that the faculty member had put down the chalk and was asking questions. Slowly, a few comments emerged, and then I had everybody write it down on a piece of paper and pass it in. And there were only two of the students in this large group of students made the connection to migration, to the fact that this was a major flyway, and that not only in the fall but in the spring you had these migratory passerines, and you had the waterfowl coming through in large numbers, and if you left your windows over, you hear them at night. One of the students did say that. He said, come to think about it, this time of year, I hear things going over at night that I don't hear the other time of year. And these appear to be waterfowl that are flying high. So most people don't have that close of an observation to the natural world, and that made me very sad. So I decided to use this natural history theme to teach some basic biology through that theme back to issues that students cared about. And the decline in migration for a number of different species, from whales to birds to many things in between, amphibians, other keystone species and flagship species that we have out there, led me to develop this course. So I wanted to get students to observe the natural world, and decided that this course would be good for competency-based thinking. We wanted to present a problem to students that they would have to think about. They'd have to find new information, communicate on that, and solve some of these problems. So it's designed as a biology course that has ecology and public policy integrated together. It happens to be a 6-credit course, and 2 of those credits we award to experiential learning in our program. Many people have used this kind of a theme in other kinds of courses that are 3-credit courses. They could be under division courses. They could be non-major courses. So all of those things are applicable here. When you're developing your student outcome goals, the kinds of goals that we had here in this course, learning some very basic science and public policy through these migration issues, so working through this capacious public policy issue to learn the biology that you need to understand the issues. Develop an understanding of the complexity of conservation issues through discovery of and critical review of relevant, pertinent events that the students actually care about themselves. Identifying frontiers for research, becoming inspired to become research biologists. Appreciate the historical and the cultural roles, the ethics that we've developed in this country toward public policy decisions around migratory organisms. And enabling students to involve diverse groups of people and opinions to achieve workable solutions. So the students do have to work with a variety of people in the public policy arena and non-government organizations in the public to draw some conclusions and address some pertinent problems. And then I've added more recently influence of climate change fluctuations to organisms in the ecosystem. Some of this is learning how to make observations and developing new questions to ask about the implications of this as the climate changes over time, how organisms are going to be affected by that. So this is a learning community course. And what I mean by that, and this is highly variable among different people, but I mean that a learning community course involves group activities, and in this case it's case study activities. So it is a writing intensive course as defined by our university, rewrites 3,000 words in a scientific writing format. Students are required to keep journals in the course, and I have 2 components that I have developed and written up that I call frontline journal writing and reflective journal writing. And this goes right along with good theory by people like David Kolb to use reflective practice, and especially in outdoor classroom environments where students are outside. I don't really use the word field trip anymore because it's not just an observation activities that we do, but they are very interactive activities that require this kind of journaling. Current events, what's happening in the world today relevant to students' lives are very important here. Doing literature reviews for students is also very important. They need to understand what are credible sources of information and how to utilize those and how to appropriately give credit for others that are doing research. The experiential learning component in the field, again, this is based on Kolb-based experiential learning. And then the students also do portfolios, and leaning more and more toward variation, and they can do electronic portfolios, or still students sometimes have components with their field journaling and things that can be paper portfolios as well. I think that what we've learned over the years, and that this course is a model course in SENCER for the past number of years, indicates that we have certainly learned that collaboration versus competition within a learning environment produces better outcomes for everybody. Values and rewards teaching, so that if you're an instructor that's doing this kind of approach with your course, that you'll have a better time. You won't become burned out by teaching the same thing over and over again. It provides for the dynamic learning both in the group environment and individual environment. Certainly faculty and students both learn. This is a key concept for most learning community descriptions for courses, is to say you're constantly learning as you develop and teach these courses. And it provides relevance to students' lives so that they can, I think that's the foundation for taking this on to beyond the classroom and beyond their undergraduate education, curiosity about science, the tremendous amount of science that they're going to learn after they're out of school. So stimulating students to do that. And also, you'll find out that, a lot of faculty ask about, well, how do you evaluate or assess learning communities? And we'll talk about that a little bit with formative and summative kinds of evaluation techniques. Certainly the SENCER SALG as self-assessment instruments are good to use with students, but there often are questions that come up among faculty as to how do you evaluate a course that has all these complex components to it and not just multiple choice exams. So the outcomes that we expect to see from this kind of a learning community course are the facilitation of deeper learning. A key component that I make, a promise that I make to students, is that you will not have a final exam in this course that you can't do better on in 1 year, 2 or 3 years than you do when you first take the course. And I think that's a measurement. I often ask students or faculty to say, you taught this course and the students had a distribution of A, B's, and C's. If you take that same group of students a year later and set them down in a room and give them the same exam, would your distribution of grades and would all the students do as well or better on those exams? And most people say, oh gosh, no. And I think that's a strong indication of shallower learning versus deeper learning, that when you're actually solving real world problems using knowledge base rather than facts that have been memorized, that you should be able to do better at solving these problems as you get more experienced in your life. This kind of approach, I have found, empowers students. They become more self-confident as learners because they're working with things that they're interested in, that they select, and also because they have interaction among themselves and with professionals in the field and with the public. And that kind of development in college courses is very positive. It creates this interdisciplinary dialogue. None of our issues in society are isolated into a particular disciplinary component, and it's necessary that you develop the capacity to have that interdisciplinary dialogue in an intelligent and meaningful way, and it takes practice to do that, and this is a great opportunity for students to do that. And then, of course, the pronounced engagement with current civic issues. One of the best outcomes from this course was a student that wrote back to me a few years later and said, Dr. Wood, from your course, I now read the newspaper because prior to your course, I didn't think that there was anything in there that was relevant to my life. And now I find stuff in there that's relevant all the time. So I can identify issues that come up in the media that are important issues, and it stimulates me to think about those and to remember the kinds of things we did in your course. So thank you for that. And so I think that that's the kind of outcome that we're really looking for the continued engagement of these students. All right, well, we have on the website and we have available for you an outline. Some of these materials are there, and I'm more than happy to provide additional materials that change over time. No course remains static over time. The populations of students might change and that sort of thing. So hop on board, modify your courses, develop new courses, and take off with that. I wanted to provide a few examples of the civic engagement component of this and how the reflection that I've gotten back from a time that I recently taught this course. I've taught this course regularly since the late 90s, and I'm going to provide you with a few student quotes to emphasize some of the things that I've presented to you here. So I think that these are the kinds of quotes that you find from many of your students. I hear a student saying, "I feel certain I will never again take my position as a citizen so lightly." So I interpret that this is a particular student who has made the transition from "I don't really care, voting doesn't matter to me, it doesn't impact my life," to somebody that's going to perhaps get involved and go to civic meetings in their community and perhaps vote and do those kinds of things. One of the texts that I've used for this course is by Hugh Dingle when he was at UC Davis. And it's also used at graduate level courses at Davis. And I think it's good for students to read things that are a little bit more complex, that have terms that they need to learn and concepts and theories. It's very interesting. And here's a student that's finding out on their own that they're finding parallels between other courses in the sciences that they're taking. So they're intentionally, or they're finding a way to multitask between courses, and we are doing a better job these days, but everybody should strive to make courses interact with other courses and encourage students to do that. So here's an example of formative feedback. 1 minute writing, quizzes, whatever you want to call them, generating discussions in the class time that we have should come about by having students do their reading and then bringing them into class. We know students don't often get much out of readings, and they report this, that reading and lecturing are two of the pedagogical practices that are not the most effective teaching tools. But having students learn how to read scientific literature is important. And I think that these quizzes help to do the formative feedback in a discrete way with a small amount of information, so that students build confidence and say, hey, I was able to make these links, and when a student writes and says, it makes me very satisfied when I can think things through for myself and come up with a complex answer that makes some sense and that I can back up and rationalize. I think those are very positive learning outcomes. Very typical response about writing. This whole writing thing is so difficult. This is a very positive kind of response. A lot of our students, by the time they graduate, come back and say, I'm so glad, it was so hard, the writing that I did, and now I'm really thankful because I've gotten better at it, and I can actually write, and my job requires me to do some writing, and now it comes about a little bit easier, and I'm better at it. So this, to me, is a positive example because a student is struggling with it, but they're sticking with it, and learning is hard, and learning to write is hard. But a student that says this, it's so difficult, I keep doing it, and I'm not quite pleased with the progress that I've made. At some point, they should be pleased, but it does, whatever motivates them to stick with it, and whatever you're doing to motivate them to stick with it is a good thing. These are examples of our work with salamanders. I like to put them through to ponder on a little bit. The two types of journaling, I created this idea. I looked through, and maybe for lack of finding other resources that I wanted to use, and being a scientist and journaling, I sort of made up these terms of frontline and reflective writing in my journal components and what I've written up. And I do have a handout that I give the students that define these things fairly exactly. And students respond to them in various ways. The frontline journal writing, keeping good notes on who, where, when, when we're in the field, what are you doing? Could you recreate this? And 10 years later, can you look back and see the detail in your journal that you need to keep? And that doesn't just mean you're taking some pictures with your cell phone. It means you're actually keeping a good journal with good notes, including illustrations and things that have detail to them, because that's a better way to learn when you engage with it. It also provides other kinds of intellectual nourishment for students that I've found out. It makes students pull together patterns in the class. They feel good about doing it. I have students that sit down and journal and say, you know, this makes me feel relaxed. I feel good. I'm in the natural world and I'm responding. And we now know that spending time in the natural world is our natural state of being, and it makes us healthier. Our cognitive function improves when we get away from the stresses of our modern lives and modern light cycles and the stresses of the city, and get out into the field. It inevitably we get journal responses from students that say, this is the best thing that I've done for learning in a long time. So some of the best practices that faculty sometimes ask me about, working discussion. How do you do this? How do you generate discussion and get reflective questions? So I never predetermine what a reflective question in journaling is going to be. It's completely dependent on the direction that the discussion goes. There is so much material that students can take and run with and explore new material based on themes that they think about and ideas that they think about. And a good, robust discussion for an hour and a half will take the conversation in a particular direction. From that, then, in agreement with the students, will generate reflective questions that everybody will address over the next 12 hours before they go to sleep, ideally. Then that kind of discussion leads to productive learning, deeper learning. Identifying the learning outcomes and making sure that your students understand those learning outcomes is critically important. This type of approach for many students to be in a learning community structure like this is different for them. It's not what they're used to. It's not what they've been successful at doing in the past. So if you're taking students out of their comfort zone and saying you're not just taking a memorization, multiple choice exam kind of a course, they wonder what it is that you're going to do and how they're going to get a successful course and get a good grade. Of course, students are concerned about that. So shifting that around to say this is a practice, building the confidence in the students and comfort level with you as a teacher to let them know that this is a best practice and that the learning that they do will be rewarded, and this is how they're going to do it. And these are the kinds of, you start that off with learning outcomes. Identifying best practices for creating learning environments to achieve those outcomes. So that can be, in this particular case, I'll take students on field trips in which we have a particular objective in mind. So we might go to Cape May, or we might go up to Hawk Mountain, and we'll stay there for a couple of days. And we'll learn the history and the public policy behind these places. We'll also learn about the research that's going on there. But there's also an affective domain that the students like to go there and are likely to go back again in the future. And these things require appropriate assessment. So the assessments should be done on the things that students are learning, that are rewarding for students, and that provide an opportunity for students to work toward these appropriate assessment instruments. Most of those in the portfolios are great examples of assessment instruments toward the end of the term. Group case study work, where students able to work effectively as a group, were they able to work with members of the community, contacting them, doing personal interviews, visiting non-government organizations. I often tell our students that we're in Washington, D.C., you should utilize the NGOs that are in our area, and everybody should do that. Wherever your university is, you have organizations that are governmental organizations and representatives. You have non-government organizations and civic organizations in your community, and the student, there's enough of those organizations that you'll never extinguish the interest of students to go and engage with those organizations. The implementation of reforms. This is what we're doing in SENCER, is we're taking new ideas, sometimes taking risks, implement some of these kinds of pedagogical practices into a learning community environment, test them out, see how they work, modify them, and move on. Don't expect that you can make all of the changes in 1 year, or it might be several years. This particular course is constantly evolving, as many courses are, and take advantage of that and look to the SENCER community for support with faculty that will give you ideas and help you as you modify your courses. So with that, I'll leave you at the North Lookout at Hawk Mountain, a place that's mesmerizing for people who visit it the first time and learn how to identify migrating hawks and wonder what they're doing. As you are if you're new to developing courses with a SENCER format, take that to heart. And if you have any questions, please contact myself or any of the other senior SENCER faculty who will be happy to help you with designing a new course and provide you with those materials. Thank you.